One of the ways we can find truth is through numbers, such as polls, surveys, studies. You may think to yourself, well, I thought this, but looking at the numbers, obviously something else is happening here. These studies are a real part of what I do on this podcast. Well, of course, we need to look at what the questions actually are on the surveys. We need to understand the intent. There are some things where you can just find hard facts in the numbers. We're going to go over some of those in this episode with Alex Bass of Mormon Metrics. Now, this episode is brought to you by Go and Do Travel. I'm the official spokesman for Go and Do Travel and the Wavemakers podcast cruise. This is coming up November 15th through 22nd. I'm anticipating this will be one of the funnest trips we've done. We've got Jacob Hansen of Thoughtful Faith, Cardin Ellis of Word Radio, Jasmine Rapoli, Hayden and Jackson Paul of The Stick of Joseph, David Boyce of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, and Dave Butler of Plain and Precious Things. Go to cwicmedia.com, cwicmedia.com, go up to the top to trips and events, scroll down to Wavemakers, and make sure you use the promo code CWIC-CWIC5 for a 5% discount. Let's look at these numbers. All right, Alex, what are some of the trends that you are most interested in within the LDS community?
Oh, man. I mean, I kind of like to dabble in just a little bit of everything. I have a political science background. That's what I studied. I also did some political polling stuff. And so I'm very interested in politics, but also this, religiosity, like spiritual, religious habits of members, and I think growth of the church stats are very interesting to me and to other people as well. So I kind of try and dabble in pretty much anywhere that there are numbers. So
where are you pulling the data from? I mean, typically, are you looking at the major polling companies primarily, or you're looking at Pew and others, or are there other specific polls that you're pulling from that are very specific to the Latter-day Saints?
Yeah. So I try to get something from everywhere. So a lot of what I use are the big data sets. One of them is the Cooperative Election Study and the Pew Religious Landscape Study. These are huge studies that have, 60K people per wave. And so you can really get a decent sample size for the LDS community. But yeah, I mean, I will try, and whenever I find a data set, say with like a survey with like 6K people, I will always try and note like, okay, our confidence intervals are going to be wider here since there's not as many LDS people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I also will scrape data from sites, from public sites, and I have those data sets publicly available, the ones that I scrape. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go into the gender gap. This is something that's very interesting to me. I've been following this. I get very heavy into the data on the fertility rates in the U.S., in the West, et cetera, which are to me very discouraging. And I think it's the biggest temporal issue on the globe right now. But there are some really interesting things happening in the gender gap right now, especially between the 18 and 30-year-olds. But you've pointed out that typically, right, the religiosity among young Latter-day Saints is disappearing, like it is with everybody else in Christianity. But what do you think is driving the shift right now, particularly among young women who are becoming less religious than men between the ages of 18 and 30?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thing to talk about because traditionally, especially in the past, several decades, it is women who are more religious than men, and they indicated they attend church more often, they report studying the scriptures more frequently, they view religion as a more important thing in their life. But like you mentioned recently, with some of the cooperative election study data, I've noticed that this gap between women and men among the younger group is is disappearing. And there is suggestive evidence too of perhaps young men showing more religiosity than some young women. So yeah, as far as what is driving that, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. Especially when you only have a few survey questions to look at. But I think there are a lot of cultural shifts, especially in the U.S. right now among young women. I have written about things specifically with garments. In some of the data that I looked at recently, young women were less likely to wear garments, especially the younger ones, whereas the older women wear at about the same rate as older men do. So that could be suggestive of something. But yeah, just a general, young women are not seeing religion as important in their life as previously.
Well, you've got a couple of graphs here that you've gone over here. I want to cover this. So this is church attendance decreasing among 18 to 30-year-old female Mormons.
Yeah.
So as you say here, aside from weddings and funerals, how often do you attend religious services? And of course, just looking at this, go ahead and why don't you just describe this? And do you have context for this? When you say traditionally, but is this something from the last 5-10 years? The numbers that I've seen kind of show that it's actually maybe even 5 years or less. But how far back do we need to go where we see maybe a strong change with this? Is it because this is not just Latter-day Saints, so it's not just a garment issue. The way I would say it is a Christianity issue as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing, the thing is with these types of things is like you really want to validate your findings with multiple data sources. And so this is an example of one data source, the cooperative election study. Mm-hmm. But I look forward to doing more analysis with other data sources to see if these trends hold in other data sets. But yeah, like I was mentioning before, I don't have data. This is just from the literature. I don't have data specifically on my blog about how things used to be 20, 30 years ago or something like that. But yeah, this trend that we're seeing, like you said, like you can see in the chart, it's something that is emerging and it's very recent.
There's another one here I want to cover real quick. This is
So I think Ryan Burge talks about this a little bit as well. But one thing he's careful to say as well is that it isn't necessarily, we don't necessarily have proof that young men are acting more religious, just that the gender gap in religiosity, especially young people, is disappearing. And that's what you can clearly see here. And you can also see that fewer young people are viewing religion as very important in their life, which was different even 10 years ago, a decade ago, or a little more than a decade ago.
Yeah, Ryan Burge also had said, it's, there is a difference also that actually in the last year, I think it's been maybe a year and a half now, that young men have actually turned a corner and have started to they've ticked up in religious attendance and saying that religiosity is more important to them. It's a tick, right? It's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need more data to validate.
Fairly low, and the trend is still downward. But he was showing that there was a tick upward for young men, while the young women were actually going down quite a bit. But it's really fascinating because I sit here and I think, well, how is this happening? What is going on that would change this? Because if you go to the male and female of any age, and you look just at the last couple of years now, it's even, right? You've got about an even mark here of men and women that are religious and attending on a regular basis, which is good. I mean, that's right. You kind of look at that and say, well, that's great. It's typically been women, and there's been single women in the church, in the pews, and not enough men. Well, okay, maybe now there's an even number, but anyway, so it's kind of troubling because women are typically seen as kind of the last line of defense in religion. And their numbers are dropping here. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out why. What is this? What is it? There could be is garments an issue among young women? Okay, that might be something, but it is that younger. We're looking at a Gen Z type age here of 18 to 30 that are losing religion. So
yeah, this is definitely something I'm interested in exploring more and trying to figure out. The whys behind some of these questions. And I think you hit on some of the things. I also think more now than in the past, religion is becoming, or it's kind of at the center of a lot of political talk, where there's starting to be, or there's been a bit of a divide among Democrats and Republicans along those religious lines, where Republicans are generally more religious and Democrats are generally less religious. And maybe that wasn't true in the past. We're seeing
it was less true anyway.
Less true anyway.
I knew that. Yeah. And it probably was pretty even at some point.
Yeah.
But even 10, 20 years ago, it was still, that gap, I think, was smaller than we might find today. All right. The second one is married individuals, right? So you've got these two groups of people that you talk about, these two hurdles that the church might need to look at changing or addressing, at least in the future.
Like
one of them
in the next century. Yeah.
In the next century. That's what it was. Right. And you've got married couples have a greater retention within the church and within Christianity. Non-married couples have a lower retention rate. And then you've got white individuals in the church have a higher retention rate than non-white. But on those two levels, you have the married couples are shrinking in the amount of people getting married. Mm-hmm. So the two groups that have the higher retention are both decreasing, married people and non-white people. That's where you're also certainly non-white is where the Latter-day Saints especially are getting the most growth, right, in the church, but they have the lowest retention. I've got my ideas on this, but do you have an idea of
So let me start by saying, a lot of the data that we have, a lot of the large data sets that we have that we can really dive into some of these questions, it's US based, and so, and specifically in this post that we're talking about here, this is data from the US. And so, there's been a lot of growth, especially in Africa in recent years. And obviously most people in Africa are non-white. But specifically in the US population and among Latter-day Saints in the United States, there's a lower retention for, both the non-married groups, the single and the divorced groups, and also the non-white groups. And in the US population, and also in the Latter-day Saint population, the married group is shrinking. People are taking longer to get married, and more people are just remaining single. And so you can see that tension there as something that's going to have to be addressed in the future.
But anyway, all right. So you've got here again, married, single, divorced, and other. How does the church address this? Right? You've got.
I mean, these are great questions. I'm kind of looking at the trends, and I'm like, these are going to be pressure points in the future. How the church addresses it, I have no idea. I think, they have probably known about this trend, like that's why singles words are here. I know they've known about this trend. As far as my ideas, I don't know. I think, everything around the church is very family centered, and I think that's amazing. But also, maybe just exploring other ideas. Singles can be part of the family, or non-traditional family types can be part of the family. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but those are some ideas. Okay.
Looking at the white and non-white here also, in the trend in the last 15 years continues. More U.S. Mormons will be non-white in 2065. Again, are you saying on this one that this is just U.S.?
Yeah. So this is, we're talking specifically about the US, and this is following a population trend in the United States, where I think about 20 years earlier, the US is projected to be majority non-white. So I think by 2035 or something, the US is projected to be majority non-white. But so these first, I think these first 4 years on this chart are from actual data that we observe. Or no, the first 5 data points are from data that we observe. And then after that, from 2030 to 2065 is just if it continues along the same rate.
All in the same lines, right.
Yeah.
But again, same issue here as you have with married and single individuals. If it, and I would suggest here that you have probably, but anyway, I would suggest here that probably what you have is in white communities, you've probably just had a more entrenched infrastructure for the church for a longer period of time. You've got more leadership that's been developed, more of a cultural Latter-day Saint culture that's been developed in those communities, whereas you don't have as much of a stronghold yet in those other areas. It's like Mexico. I went on my mission to Mexico, and the retention rate used to be 11% down there, and now I think it's 20%. And so I
don't know. That sounds
you've got a change there that is based on, leadership. You've got development of leadership. You've got a development of families. You've got a development of those that are building a Latter-day Saint culture within Mexico that barely existed when I went on my mission. And that is definitely going to make a big difference as far as retention, I think. And,
I kind of think, and I would love to explore this more with survey data, but I would love to know like how strong the association is with people outside of the US with the church and the US. And I wonder how that plays into all of these other talks, all these talks about retention and other things internationally, and even the racial diversity within the church. I kind of wonder if I don't know that they would ever do this, but one idea that I have is they could potentially move the headquarters somewhere internationally, and that could, I don't know, maybe that would signify, this is a worldwide church. This isn't a Salt Lake City thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, possible. It's interesting. I have some friends in South Africa, Black friends, and I was speaking with them. In fact, I was doing an interview with them, and there was about 5 women that were on this Zoom call. And, out there in South Africa, you've got the white population, you've got the Black population. And a number of them had been on their missions. So one of the young women had gone to Jamaica, mostly a Black population. And she's on her mission, and she's handing out these pamphlets. A Black woman handing out these pamphlets to this Black population, and it's full of all white people and families.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure they connect really well with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very difficult thing. But what they said was, I said, so is the church in South Africa more of a Black church or more of a white church? And they said, well, it's very much a white church.
Oh, interesting.
And then as I was talking to them, I went through the stats and I was looking at everything, and it's like, well, wait a minute here. There are a lot more Black members than there are white members in South Africa. The growth is all coming among the Black population. And she said, well, they keep pretty separate is one thing, but they'd also mentioned that, as they go to the temple, it had been mostly white. There's 2 or 3 temples now in South Africa, but it was mostly white images, white paintings, and of white people, and they've changed all of that.
Yeah,
and they had remarked how it was such a big deal to them.
Okay, yeah,
right. That okay, now this is a reflection of me, and so there were more of the paintings were of Black individuals with Christ and etc., which makes all the sense in the world. But the reason they still call it a white church overall is because of what they get from Salt Lake, right? It's still that connection in thinking. It's a white church, even though in their wards they're all Black.
Yeah.
Right. They still overall are thinking to themselves, okay, well, this is more of a white church, but we have a Black congregation.
Yeah.
which is really an interesting dynamic, right?
I do think that this is something that church leaders should be thinking about for the future, because I do believe that the future of the church will be mostly non-white.
Absolutely. I mean,
And so,
we are in the
um,
sunset of the Gentiles right now. I don't think there's
so,
any question about that.
so I think there should be some adaptations or just looking ahead for
Yeah.
that time. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. One more point I really want to cover here, and that is BYU. I'm a BYU person, a BYU family.
Great.
And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about that. You know, you've written about overall negative perceptions of Latter-day Saints, which is not good for us. I think are we at the bottom?
I think among religions, yes.
Yeah, among religions. Yeah, we're like near the bottom. And I don't know if that's completely because of perspective or if there's also a non-familiarity issue that goes along with that, perhaps, as compared to, Catholics and the Protestant denominations.
Yeah, it's probably a mixture of getting poked fun of a lot in popular culture, and I don't know, missionaries knocking on their door.
It'd be interesting to know if the Hulu series has made a change on that at all, and whether the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is positive for Latter-day Saints or a negative.
But, I definitely has brought more awareness.
It definitely brings more awareness, and I think that is an issue, and that's what I usually tell people about that. So when the Book of Mormon musical came out and everyone was freaking out about it, I'm thinking, you don't understand. This is good. This is good. This is a good thing for us. More awareness is good. But anyway, you'd written about the negative perceptions of Latter-day Saints. Why do you think BYU has managed to maintain a more favorable brand image than the church?
Yeah. So my theory behind that is just people in general have better views of educational institutions. So when you break it down by educational institutions, and this is from a place I used to work at, Morning Consult, it's near the bottom. BYU is near the bottom of the educational institutions, yet it is still net favorable to people. So it's more polarized than other universities, but still a net positive.
So you had mentioned that in your article that 1/3 of Americans have never even heard of BYU.
Yeah.
Right. It is, look at the religious affiliation there with the church and strong, long-running athletic programs. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I was curious about that as well. I broke it down by a few different demos. One of them was region. I expected the Western region to be a lot more familiar with BYU than some of the other regions. And there was a difference between region, but it wasn't actually that as big as I was thinking it was going to be. Maybe it was a 10-point difference or something between like the South or the Northeast and the West. But I just think it's like, there are plenty of schools, probably the same size as BYU, but, in some small town in South Carolina or in, I don't know, some other place that we haven't heard of, or that maybe we see the acronym, but it doesn't really stick. So that's my theory.
Have you seen any data on other religious universities, and are they near the bottom also, along with BYU, with universities more broadly, or are they up higher?
I'd have to check. I believe it just depends on the university. So, for example, Notre Dame I think people are more aware of Notre Dame than probably any other religious university that I'm thinking of. I mean, you have the Ivy Leagues, which are religious.
The divinity school, sure.
I
have a hard time calling them religious anymore.
Yeah. But Baylor, I think Baylor is close to BYU in awareness. So I think it's pretty comparable to the brand awareness is pretty comparable to Baylor.
Cool. Well, are there any projects you're working on now that would be of interest to us?
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of look for interesting data and try and write articles about it. I I'm excited to dive into some more of these topics that we talked about. I specifically with religion and the gender gap and that type of thing. I also am trying to work on more interactive tools and use some statistics and try and so I'm specifically talking about politics with this, but try and pinpoint where people are becoming more liberal or more conservative in the LDS population.
It's mostly more liberal from what I've seen.
So it does seem to be trending more liberal.
Skews that way, yeah.
But
I don't know. Maybe you worked with is it Pew? No, is it at BYU?
Sorry, with
is it PUGH? The professor there?
Oh, no, I have not worked with.
Okay, he's done a lot of that type of work on.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. The sociology
politics.
Guy. Yeah.
He kind of arose in the 2016 election, and a lot of data coming in about Latter-day Saints. From him. So
he makes a bunch of maps. In certain areas. What I'm going to try and do is look. So he looks at just how everyone voted in certain areas. I'm going to try and estimate how the LDS people in each county are changing across the US. So that's one project I'm trying to work on right now. So
yeah, very cool. All right, Alex, where does the audience find you?
So I am on Substack, the Mormon Metrics account, and I also have an Instagram account. And I do weekly charts I try to be neutral and So
well, it's great, and it's great because you can check in on him, go to Substack, take a look at him in Mormon Metrics, and just look at the data. It's very interesting stuff, and it's always pertinent to a Latter-day Saint. So anyway, Alex, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice to meet you, Greg.